welcome Euan McLachlan. Euan, it's good to see you. How are you?
Good afternoon, Hugo. Good to see you too.
So just for our viewers to introduce you, Euan is an expert in international currency transfer and foreign exchange. You first worked in the FX industry 20 years ago,
Yeah,
then returned to it 10 years ago.
Yes.
And over many years, the landscape has greatly changed, but the same elements remain the same. Security, customer service, and probably most importantly for most people, competitive rates of exchange.
Yep.
Euan's focuses on the private client side of FX, and he has assisted many hundreds of clients to move funds between currencies and to most countries around the world. So, Euan, so let me get your presentation up and hand over.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah, so good afternoon, everyone, whoever's listening. As Hugo said, yeah, my name's Euan, and I've been in FX now for 10 years straight. And in a previous life, when I still lived in Scotland, I did work in FX for another 3 years. So combined total of 13 years experience. And as I said, the landscape has changed for foreign currency transactions and international money transfers. I think when I started in the industry, certainly 20 years ago, but even the 10 years ago, many people hadn't heard about your alternative options to using a bank. So that's kind of the first thing that we try to cover is, well, why would you use a broker? Why not just use your bank? The simple answer is that banks have got many, many things to look after. They've got the high street branches still just about in the UK. They'll do mortgages, do credit cards, they do loans. They arrange many, many things. So the foreign exchange element for banks will typically drop way down their list of priorities. It's just not something they give an awful lot of importance to. So brokers will look at nothing else, essentially. Yes, we might do certainly some different products and we will look after businesses and private clients. But within that, all we do is take one currency and flip it into another currency and send it on to where a client asks us to. Now, one thing to remember is that we are not what's known as a speculative broker. So I think some people, when they first get introduced to the world of FX, there is a fear element because they think it's Wolf of Wall Street and we're all gambling with money and we're trying to make money from people's hard-earned cash. We're not. We don't do anything to do with speculation. So we're purely what's known as a deliverable broker. So we can only take funds from one currency, exchange them into another currency, and then send them on to another location. That's the only thing we do. So that's why brokers such as ourselves, such as Corpay, will get you a better exchange rate because we can't make money any other way, whereas a bank can. Now, obviously, within that, we have to be able to compete with the banks. So we will offer highly competitive exchange rates. Banks in the past, we used to say that they would offer a range of 3 to 5% off the prevailing rate. That's really not true anymore. And without going through checks on banks on a daily basis to prove that, we tend not to claim that anymore. So we will typically just say that we will offer you the most competitive exchange rate that we can get. And that's based on certain factors like the volume, what the market's doing at the time. And then, as I'll come on to later, dependent on the actual product that the client decides to pick, whatever product is best for somebody to use given their scenario. We do have different options available to us. There's not many, but there are some that can help you maximize what you get at the other end for your cash. And if you look at a currency broker, and we're not the only one out there, I always say that there's many good currency brokers out there alongside Corpay. They can give you market updates, rate alerts. You've got somebody who, let's be honest, FX is an absolutely boring subject. I have absolutely no interest in it other than it's my job because it doesn't affect me. It doesn't impact me. I'm not about to move to Cyprus tomorrow. So what the pound to euro rate's doing other than for my clients isn't relevant to me. It won't impact me at all. So we have currency dealers and currency specialists who will sit and look at markets all day long, every day. You've got them on tap. If you want to register with a broker such as yourself, you've got them to tap into their knowledge and their experience and their expertise and what market trends they see. Because although the market moves every 3 seconds, there will be trends where if it's trying to climb up or if there are market forces that are driving it down. The big thing that the currency markets don't like is surprises. And the most obvious one for us in the UK is when we voted for Brexit. People really didn't think we were going to vote for Brexit, and it took the pound to euro rate overnight down by many cents, and people gained or lost quite a lot of money on the back of that. So that's the things that the currency market don't like. Things that they can predict: an upcoming election. We've got one coming where if the polls really show that they think one party is going to win, the markets will start to factor that in. So there won't be a big shock in the currency markets if the polls prediction is correct. If the polls are predicting a Labour win and it doesn't happen, then the markets can react because they weren't ready for that. They didn't expect that to be. If you register with a broker such as Corpay, you'll be given a dedicated point of contact. So depending whether you're doing monthly transfers, one big transfer, you've got different requirements, you'll have that person on hand to talk through what's the best routes and options for you to use from your currency broker. And they're there at the end of the phone. You've got the direct number, so you're not having to go through a call centre. And I'm not trying to run the banks down, but if you're working with a bank, the odds of you speaking to the same person, you certainly can't walk into a high street branch and discuss foreign currency transfers with somebody in the branch. So the dedicated point of contact is very good to remove any stresses and strains from the transaction. And I will move on to the next slide. Corpay are a relatively new company to me. We used to be known as a different company, as some people may have heard of us as Global Reach, and prior to that, we're actually known as FC Exchange. So the business has been around for 15 years, but Corpay, for me, is a relatively new employer. So we've been owned by them for just over a year now, and they are possibly the largest. It's one of these things, how do you claim, how do you measure who's the biggest? We are certainly one of the largest non-bank payment providers in the market now. We're a New York Stock Exchange listed company with a global presence. We've got offices here in the UK. We have offices in Spain, in Holland, in France, in India now, I can't think of other places, in Canada, in America. So we have a global presence, and that obviously helps us with the global clients because of its time frames and just that local knowledge and ability to assist clients. So although we are part of a massive company within the private client division, we almost operate still as a small autonomous business. So we've got 200 people in the London office, but of them 4 or 5 will be looking after private clients, and then myself, I'm actually based down in the southwest of the UK, down in Cornwall, and there are 7 of us operate out of this office. So we try to keep that very personal, hands-on approach with the clients. Sorry, a question just popped up. I think we'll come to the questions at the end. Hugo, is that the best route? So, yeah.
Yes.
So sorry, I've lost my trend there. So yeah, we operate very much still almost as a very small company, although we've got this backing of this massive company. And all that really does is give us the ability to offer the most competitive exchange rates because of the volume that Corpay transacts on a daily basis between its corporate clients and its private clients. Currency exchange is no different from going into a warehouse or a cash and carry to buy a box of Mars bars. If you're a large shop and you want to buy hundreds of thousands of Mars bars, then the price is likely to be better for you than somebody walking in to buy one box of Mars bars. Currency really works in the same way. It's no more complicated than that. It's a volume-driven business. So if you're buying lots of euros with pounds, then we still buy the euros directly from a bank. So the bank that we go to, if we're buying hundreds of thousands of euros, we will get a slightly better rate than is advertised on, say, Google. If you Google the exchange rate and look at that pound to euro or dollar to euro, or whatever pairing we're looking at, we can't achieve that rate. We get very, very close to it, and certainly no private individual can get anywhere near that rate. And it's something to look out for if you are starting to look, if you're an expat or about to become an expat and you're looking really at the currency markets for the first time. When you Google the exchange rate, that's a rate that's not available to anyone. That might be available to multinational banks moving currency between themselves, but even to us as Corpay, we'll buy very, very close to that. And then what we do is pass on the strength, the buying strength that we've got to our clients. I think in the introduction, Hugo mentioned that I've been in the industry for sort of your combined time of 13 years, and it has changed in that time. But for me, certainly being a very canny, tight Scotsman, one of the key things to look out for is security. And we've always said that we are an FCA authorised business in the UK, and then we hold relevant authorisations in different offices around the world. And that's very important because it means that we have to operate segregated client accounts. So the money that a client sends us never belongs to Corpay. It enters through one of our banking partners, and the one that we still use and have for years, amongst others, is Barclays. So any client funds would sit in a Barclays account, ring-fenced in their name, with any director or anyone of any note in Corpay has no access to that money other than the request, really, from Barclays that they would move it on for them. Excuse me. As I sort of touched on the FCA authorisation, one thing I would always stress that is important is that if you're looking around at brokers and you're looking at options for moving your money, do check that the company you're speaking with is registered with the FCA. Now, most brokers nowadays are, and there are companies out there that operate under what we call a white label. I'm not going to say that they don't do what they should do, but you won't see them on an FCA register, because they are a company that's set up, and what they do is they power their transactions by a third party. So they'll go to somebody who does hold their own credit lines, has the banking relationships, and they facilitate the transaction through them. So I won't run them down, but just be careful that if you do look at one of them, you won't see them on an FCA register, because they are not directly authorised by the FCA. They hold they take the authorisation from the third party that they use. One thing that is very basic but is very beneficial with a broker is the ability to run traces on payments. And as Corpay, we can almost instantly get the trace on where the funds are in a transaction process. Now, we get very few that go wrong, and but they do occasionally get held up by a bank, especially if you're sending funds from here to the US. The funds will go through certainly different routing channels, and one of the routing banks can hold it up. We have the ability to straight away trace and see where the funds are sitting. So if anyone's got any anxieties about, well, I did the transaction yesterday, you said the funds left you yesterday, they've not reached me yet, we can find out where they are. And again, keep saying it, I'm not going to run the banks down, but trying to get that response from a bank, if you do it, will be a bit slower than using a broker such as ourselves. Mentioned earlier on that we have different products available. Now, the three products that we've got really are what's called the spot contract, limit order, and a forward contract. So taking each of them in turn, the spot contract is still by far and away our biggest product. So that is literally if somebody has registered with us and they're looking at relocating to America, they registered with us 6 months ago, they've sat and watched the rate, but they haven't done anything about it. The time has come for them to move, and they speak to us today because they want the funds there within the next couple of days. The spot rate is what's available on the day. So we will look at the spot rate and say it's $1.2840 at the minute. We can offer you $1.2710. Is you happy with that rate? And that's the spot rate. We can't really do much to move it at the time, because if client has got to the point where they really need to get the funds there within the next few days, that's what we're working with. So the spot rate is still the most common one that we use. Limit order for me is I say it's my favorite, but it is, because there's a degree of flexibility in a limit order, especially if you are an expat and you've gone through visa processes and you are looking to move. So you've got some kind of time frame for when you will be in your destination country. So you've registered with your broker, you've done that bit. Then you speak to your personal point of contact, and they will look at what the market's doing. So again, we'll use pound to dollar. If you're saying, well, it has been hovering up towards the 129s, I really, really would like to get $1.28 for my exchange. We can set that target figure in the market. And if we're all happily asleep at 2 in the morning and the currency markets are still moving and that figure is achieved, it will automatically buy the currency for you. But the flexibility with the limit order comes that you don't need to give any money once we set it up. So you still only pay for the order at the time that it executes. So you're not having to secure a deposit to secure the rate, because we're not actually buying the currency at the time. All we're doing is setting a target in the market and saying we want to achieve $1.28. And if that's achieved, great. If it's not achieved and you get to the point where you're moving, then you're flipping back to the spot rate. But it does give you that flexibility. On the flip side, you can also set a lower limit. If you think, I absolutely can't afford to take anything less than $1.25, we can set that in the market. People tend not to, for one reason, the dealer will be keeping an eye on it anyway. Your personal point of contact will be keeping an eye on the market. And if they see your currency pairing slipping away, they will generally have the book of clients, and they'll contact them to say, just to give you a heads up that it is slipping, and we're looking at a trend where it is likely to keep going down. So they'll try and keep the client informed of that. Forward contract is one that we do still have a number of clients using it. It's very, very good if you have got a fixed time when you're moving. You can lock in a rate for 2 years, but it can only be done against a property purchase. So you can't simply say, I want to send my savings. I'll be moving within the next year, so I'll book in a rate now because it looks good. It's used when the rate is favourable, but more often it's used for people who really want to budget. So if they know they're buying a property and they've got they need $300,000 or euros or whatever to buy that property, they can work back to what that's going to cost them in sterling, or depending where the money's coming from, and you can lock in the rate. So if the rate's good and you know that to get that $300,000 will cost you £210,000 at this present time, you can lock in the rate. Now, a forward does tie you in. So whereas the limit order gives you the flexibility to say, actually, can you just cancel that and I'll just book a spot? When you execute on a forward, you are actually entering a contract. So you are committed to buying the currency. As a company, we will take anything between 5 and 10% deposit to secure that rate, because although we're not doing it, we may not draw down on that contract for 2 years, we will physically go into the market and buy the currency and hold that currency for the client. So that's why we ask for a deposit on that. So it takes away a bit of the flexibility that you get with the limit order, but great if you want to budget. It really is a handy tool if you just want to know what it's going to cost you to buy that property in whatever time frame you've got. So the forward doesn't have to be for 2 years. It can be a short forward. You can have a forward for as little as a couple of months, but up to a maximum of 2 years, you can lock in an exchange rate if it's favourable for you at the time and you think that's what you want to do. One thing I should say is any currency broker, such as ourselves, is not licensed to give advice. So we can't say to somebody, the rate's really good, you should book it in. That's not what we're here for. We're here to give you information, as much information as you want or don't want, about where the rate is and what it might do. But it's your money. It's not our money to play with. We can't, as I said at the start, we don't speculate. It's your money, so it's down to the client to decide when they make that transaction. We will give them as much information as we can about what the rate may or may not do, but it's down to the client to make the decision. So we're not licensed to give advice in that sense. How does it work? It's actually a very simple process. There is no cost to setting up with a broker. You simply register for a no obligation account, and I try and steer away from using the word account, but inevitably do, because it makes it sound like you're having to deposit funds. You don't. You're simply registering, and with us being a financial organisation, we do have to do KYC and satisfy anti-money laundering requirements. So we need to make sure that the client we're representing is who they say they are. So that's when you register for an account. We will do background checks, but there's no credit check. We don't, because we're not extending any credit to a client. We simply need to verify that you are who you say you are. Once you've gone through that process, you will then be given your dedicated point of contact in the dealing team. They'll introduce themselves, get to understand a bit more about what your requirements are, and that's when they'll talk through more about the spot options, the limit options, the forward contract, the timing of your trade. Are you doing one lump sum? Do you want to split the transaction? We don't offer hedging to private clients, but some clients do hedge. They'll say, well, at the minute, I'll do some just now because I want to get some over to wherever they're moving to. So however the client wants to do it, that's when you've got that personal point of contact to talk through about your best options. And again, I will say it, that you won't get that from a bank. You don't get those options from a bank. Banks typically offer just the spot rate certainly to private clients, and that's the only option you've got. As I said, it's down to the client when they book the trade. We won't give advice. We won't say, rate's fantastic today. If I was you, I'd book that. That's not what we're here for. We can tell them the rate is good, and if they think it is good, and it's down to them to book it. Once you book an exchange rate, and once you speak to your excuse me, your point of contact, and you lock in that rate, you are entering an obligation. So we will give a client 2 days to pay us. So once the rate is booked in, what we've quoted you, what we will tell you is in dollars, is what you will receive at the other end. The only thing to look out for is some banks levy what's called a landing fee. We've obviously got no control over that, and it seems to be very, very arbitrary across countries about when the landing fee is charged and how much it is, depending from country to country. Excuse me. But when you agree the rate with your dealer, that's fixed in. If you're happy with it, they'll book it in, and then they'll give you all the information that you need to get the funds to us, and then they'll ask you to provide the update for where you want the funds to go to. For pounds to euros, for example, if we have the funds with us in the morning, the euros will typically be in the destination account that afternoon. Dollars is more or less the same. Once we get into more exotic currencies, we do always say allow 2 days, but it's rare that currency takes more than 24 hours to arrive within the destination account. In summary, why would you use a broker rather than a bank? And it is simple. It does come down to the security needs to be there. The customer service can be better, and certainly we should be able to offer a more competitive rate of exchange. We have got the different products to maybe give you some more flexibility and maximise what you receive on the other end. I will reiterate again, do try and make sure that any broker you speak with has direct authorisation from the relevant regulatory body. It's a big bee in my bonnet that making sure it's secure. It is best to register in advance. I know that some people say, oh, I'll get to that when I get to it. That's fine. We can help a client at the last minute. It's not a problem. But especially if you are in a time frame where you know you're going to be moving at a certain period, it's worth getting you set up in advance, because it doesn't cost you anything. It will just get you familiar with your dealer. They get familiar with your scenario, your situation, to see what's best for you. Excuse me. I think we are nearly done. Yeah. So yes, you can get in touch. Your partner referrals at corpay.com is a generic email that comes to myself and 3 or 4 of my colleagues. And then you've also got the link for Expat Focus landing page. But that covers off my presentation for the minute.
Thank you very much, Euan. That was really interesting. And yeah, just to reiterate, you can, alongside those contact details, you can also access quotes from Corpay via the Expat Focus website and the services tab in the top menu. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think, all expats have to transfer money from time to time, pretty much, I think. And, your first inclination is to head to your kind of bank, and it's a mistake. I mean, I think particularly for large amounts.
Yeah.
And so I think that was one of the first questions that came in. Do you have a minimum amount? Is it, if it's smaller amounts, does it need to be kind of regular, or how does that work?
The minimum we quote for a client on a one-off transfer, so if somebody only ever intends to use us for one transaction, would be £3,000 equivalent currency. The only reason we say that is that anything under that, we won't really be able to show the client a saving. For all the service that we can provide on an amount, a one-off transfer under that, we won't really show them much for saving. So we tend to steer them back to the bank, or touching on a couple of other slightly different brokers who've done a great job of heightening the awareness that brokers exist and that there are other options to use, are Wise and Revolut. So on small regular transactions, shouldn't really promote the competition, but they are fantastic and they really are good. Where we're different from them is that, as you said, Hugo, a second ago, on the larger transactions, certainly we give a bit more flexibility. There's that personal service, you've got a point of contact there. But also we are a traditional broker in the sense that we buy the currency. Wise are what's known as peer-to-peer. So they match up people sending currencies from different places. And it's not quite as simple as I'm going to make it sound, but if I know that somebody in France is sending euros and I want to send pounds, they'll match us up, and then the pounds and the euros transfer. They do have the ability to go into the market and buy the currency, but they don't. The thing to look out for is what's the amount receivable, because Wise will operate in a slightly different way to us. We take a margin off the notified exchange rate, so we will deduct a certain amount, and that's our fee. So although we say there's no fee, we do make money from it, and that's where we make it in the difference between what the prevailing rate is and what we offer to the client. Wise will advertise what we call the mid-market rate, but then they will take a fee. So it's two very slightly different ways of operating, but ultimately what people should be looking out for is what's received. Our rate will look worse than Wise, but ultimately it's what's received at the other end is what people should be looking out for.
I think that's as you say, those are kind of useful for small amounts, but if you have questions, if you need some hand holding, which for larger amounts, it's important to have, then yeah, Corpay is going to be a better option and a huge saving compared. I think, if you're a larger amount, if an expat's buying a property, a car, even, larger expenses, then it's a huge saving of probably thousands.
It can run to quite a sizable sum of money, Hugo. You're correct. Absolutely.
Another question: how long does it take to complete a transfer? I think you covered this, but just to.
I mean, really, in terms of as long as we've got the funds with us, so quite a number of clients will actually deposit funds in account with us, because they know if they've made the decision they're going to use us, they will quite often deposit the funds. We've got funds in account. We're also registered as what's called an e-money institution, so we're legally allowed to hold funds indefinitely in the same way as a bank. Some brokers don't have that authorization, so it really should be funds in, funds out. But because we've got that additional level of authorization, we can hold the funds for that period of time. So clients will deposit funds in account. If that's the case and they agree a rate, then literally the dealer will hit the button to release the funds straight away, and then they're gone. And like I say, if it's pounds to euro transaction, it'll be there later that day. And if it's your dollar, it'll still usually be certainly within the 24-hour period. So as quickly as the client can get the funds to us, that allows us to get the funds there, expedite the funds straight away to the client's destination account. So it's a very quick process.
And can you transfer to all currencies and countries?
Not all. Some are on the delightful banned list, unfortunately. And from time to time, the currencies that we can operate will change. For example, the Ukrainian hryvnia came off when things went wrong in that part of the world. We won't transfer rubles at the minute either. I think there's only about 7 or 8 countries that are on the banned destinations list. Outside of that, there are some currencies we don't hold currency accounts for. Strangely enough, the Icelandic krona is one, and I think that goes back to Iceland having quite a financial situation. It's a good number of years ago, maybe 15 to 20 years ago. So for whatever reason, we've just never opened up an Icelandic krona account again. But quite often in some countries where their own incumbent currency is a bit volatile and not particularly stable, quite often the banks and the financial institutions there will receive dollars or euros. So even though there may be some limits there's quite often there is a currency that we can send to those countries. So, but essentially, globally, and we are expanding that as we talk, because as I said, Corpay is now a very, very big company. So while global reach as we were may not have had capabilities in certain countries, Corpay did. So our currency range is actually expanding as well.
Somebody asks, what long-term trends do you see in the FX market, and how should expats prepare for future potential changes?
Long-term trends in the FX market, I think there are more brokers out there than when I started, many, many more. And I think keep looking at it from that point of view, I think the options for people looking to move money are better and better and far more competitive. We obviously, as I said, we make our money from the margin that we take off an exchange rate. And while we were always governed to a certain limit that you can't be taking margins above a certain percentage, we can't take the margins that we used to, is probably the simplest way to put it. People are far more clued up about how exchange rates work, what they should be looking for. And again, that's probably thanks to Wise, mainly how they've educated people. So I think people will have far more choice. There will be greater options. I think the speed of transactions will increase. I think AI is going to obviously have an impact on it, and not too distant future, actually. I mean, it's probably not far away, but I certainly think technology is improving how quickly and how easily, and the transparency of transactions. So I think, if anything, in terms of being an expat and how you move your money, I think it's tenfold better than it was even a couple of years ago. And I think that choice is only going to increase. Certainly for the time being, I can see a consolidation at some point in the years to come that all this, I'm not saying Corpay because it's big makes it good, but the smaller firms may struggle to compete with some of the developments. So that's where I think in the years to come, again, 3 or 4 years, we may see a consolidation back. But at the moment, there's just nothing but really expansion and more options for people.
Yeah, which is good for expats.
It is. It means they get the best rates around.
Well, look, thank you very much for your presentation.
Not at
Euan.
all. Thank you.
We've come to the end of the Expat Focus Health and Finance Summit in 2024.